What is up, guys? It's Alex here, back for another video, and in this video I'm going to be giving you guys my top 10 tips on improving at the game. So mainly we're focusing on the PvP online aspect of it, and these tips are not going to be in any particular order, so I'm not ranking them from like least important to most important or anything like that. So let's just get into this. All right, the first three tips are going to go kind of together because you really need to do the first couple of things right to do the third one right. So, number one tip, scouting. So, scouting is really the foundation of everything, right? You really need to scout well the first couple of turns, and then also when you get into the desert, you need to scout that as well as possible, right? The more information you have about the map, the better informed decisions you're going to be able to make. Imagine having an earth tome in the corner of your biome and you don't scout it, right? And then you check it after the game and it would have helped you win the game. So, for that reason, objects like redwood observatories are really good. Lookout tower as tower is good. Heroes with scouting are really good. I really love getting Fiona in the tavern because she gets advanced scouting and gives you a lot of additional scouting info. And if you get a learning stone near your town, you can get expert scouting right away, so which helps you a lot. Scouting specialists are really good, like Miriam and Beatrice, because they give you even more scouting information. And, for that reason, I don't hate having scouting on my main hero like Kalth. I kind of like him because of the scouting information that he gives you when he enters the desert. I always like to have a scouting hero enter the desert, a hero that actually has scouting, expert scouting preferably, enter the desert with my main. So I get more scouting information in the desert, which can help me make different decisions and could potentially help me win the game, right? So scouting, really important. All right, number two tip is going to be prioritization. So on Jebba's Cross, you are not going to be farming everything in your biome, right? Your priority is going to be trying to get into the desert as quickly as possible because the desert has better stuff and it's also shared. So you're not only trying to farm that to get stronger, you're also trying to deny your opponent the opportunity to get stronger, right? And you can always go back and farm your biome if you need to. In some cases, you may opt to go for a biome game, like if you're castle and you have a lot of utopias and you're going for archangels, for example, but usually it's still going to be better to break earlier and try to find something better in the desert, try to get stronger in the desert, and then go back and farm your biome if you need to, right? So as you're scouting the map, you're identifying objects that are going to be your highest priority, right? And you don't want to spend too much time farming everything, right? I've certainly fallen into this trap when my biome was really rich and I wanted to, I had the temptation to farm everything. But really, once you're strong enough to break, you should just go and break. Like, let's say you have 5 conses in your biome and a couple of hives in the corner, right? Those hives are going to be a really low priority actually because your power stack is going to be angels anyway. So what you would need to do is figure out how to farm those conses in the quickest and most efficient way possible, and then if you can farm the hives or the pickets or whatever else you have on side heroes without wasting any turns or moves and without breaking your chains, you can do that. But if it takes you additional time, skip that. I like to skip hives as Necro, for example, because as Necro, you like to snowball your skeletons and use Animate Dead. That's usually going to make you stronger than using like 30 Wyvern, without being able to resurrect them. And you would be bleeding away your skeletons in hives. So unless you can farm some angels or giants before that and, not lose any skeletons in your hives, I would actually avoid them in favor of building up my skeleton stack more. So your priorities are going to be different depending on the faction, depending on your gold situation, depending on what the map gives you. But it's really important as you're scouting to identify the highest priority objects, and then you start to kind of plan what you're going to farm first, second, and third, right? And this leads us into the third tip, which is hero chaining and using multiple heroes, right? So this does really require the scouting and the prioritization to be able to do well, and that's the reason why it's kind of challenging. It's definitely not easy to chain properly, but if you can do it well, you're going to be like in the top 10% of players, and you're going to be winning games left and right, because not that many people, especially at the lower ELO levels, know how to do this well, right? And the reason is because it really requires prioritization, and it requires planning. It requires you to plan not even one turn ahead, but 2, 3, maybe even 4 turns ahead, because some chains would require you like 2-day setup, or something like that, to be able to set up properly. So as you're scouting, as you're prioritizing, right, you're going to want to already start to think about what you're going to farm and when, and what it makes sense to do first, second, and third, and how you can chain around all of that, how you build your chains around all of that. So if you guys want to check out more information on prioritization and hero chaining, I do have video guides on that. So I'll leave those in the video description below. Hopefully they help you out. And along with the chaining, you also want to use multiple heroes, right? And this, obviously, as you're chaining, you're using multiple heroes. But this also, what I mean here, is using those heroes to do fights, right? As you're chaining, as you're farming things, you're going to want to try to farm things not only with your main, but with side heroes as well. And this comes with experience, because you need to know which fights you can and cannot do on what hero. You really don't want to be doing fights on a 0-0 hero, like difficult fights on a 0-0 hero, when you don't have a whole lot of army, right? When you have 10 angels, it's no problem to farm anything. But before that, until you get to a point where you can snowball something, you really kind of need to be careful about that, but you do need to do it. So using multiple heroes to get as much stuff done as possible is something that kind of goes along with the hero chaining, and that's something that the top players do well, and that's really what makes them the top players. All right, so the next tip is going to be plan ahead. So this, again, goes together with the hero chaining especially, and to be able to play this game well, to be able to play it properly, you really need to start planning your turns out ahead. Maybe not even the next turn, but like the next couple of turns. At least have a general idea of what you're going to be doing and when, what you're shooting for in terms of the break. Are you breaking 117, 121? And then you can kind of have that general vision, and you can build your strategy around that. You can build your chains around that. So planning ahead, super, super important. And also, it's very good to plan ahead before before it's your turn. Like if you have time, if you end your turn earlier than your opponent, then plan while he's taking his turn so that you can save time. Or that's another kind of, I would say, bonus tip is, conserving your timer. But planning ahead helps you do that. Planning ahead, you don't want to like sit there while your timer is ticking down thinking about like, oh, what am I going to do, and spend like half your timer just like thinking about what you're going to do. Because sometimes when you get into a desert, you may need like 20 or 30 minutes for a turn to farm everything, right? So planning ahead, really important. All right, the next step is going to be focusing on economy. So this is actually something that I personally still don't do that well. And if you watch the top pros play, what they do, now, don't get me wrong, I do not mean building capital. That's not what I mean. I mean farming the money objects that you see. So crypts, churchyards, like Naga banks, Medusa stores, imp caches, mansions sometimes when you're strong enough. So when you watch the top players play, like how many of you have gotten into the situation where, you do your biome game relatively well, you break relatively early, then you get to the center town in a desert, and you don't have any money to buy like a tavern and buy heroes to scout and do stuff with. So, you have to wait until the next turn, and getting to that center town that turn doesn't really do anything for you, right? Or you may not even have the money to buy Mage Guild to replenish your mana. I've certainly been in this situation many times. And this is because, as the kind of newer players will definitely, like, you may farm the map okay, like you may build your power stack and you may, have a decently strong enough army, but you're focusing only on that and you're kind of ignoring the economy. You're like, well, I have enough gold right now, right? I have enough gold for what I needed, or for what I need to do right now, and you don't actually farm crypts and churchyards and things like that when you could have, right? Now, when you watch the top players play, they will always farm as many of those money objects as possible, right? Like as they're chaining for the other more important stuff, they will build their chains in a way that allows them to actually use their side heroes to farm as much of the money, as many of the money objects along the road as possible. And this is because even if they have the gold, they know that the gold that they get from these money objects is going to come in handy later on. It's much better having like 10k gold when you take the center town, so you can build a tavern and buy 4 additional heroes, so you can scout and do as much as possible on that turn, right? So focusing on economy, farming the economy objects is also really important. You certainly don't want to break your chains for, the main stuff to do that, but you want to build your chains in a way that allows you to also farm the economy, the money objects, as you're farming the other stuff. Okay, so the next tip is going to be knowing how to take fights. Now, the interesting thing here is that this is actually not quite as important as some people may think. It does help a lot, but a lot of times, like when your army starts to get strong enough, you can basically do everything on auto combat, more or less, right? Not the difficult fights, but in most cases, you can do fights on auto combat, like you can do hives on auto combat, for example, etc. However, the better you are at taking fights, the more difficult fights you're going to be able to take, and the fewer losses you're going to have, right? And this goes along with, using terrain to your advantage, abusing things like churchyards, taking crypts with no losses, taking conses with no losses, things like that, or taking conses with low army that, a less experienced player would have died to, but, you're able to take it, so you get, even more tempo that way. So this is really something that top players, you'll see them do fights and you're like, how the hell is he planning on taking them? And then they somehow actually take that fight. So the better you are at taking fights, the higher tempo you're going to be able to have, and the more stuff you're going to be able to do in less time, in fewer turns. And this certainly comes with experience, though. There are, things that you can learn and things that you can do. I do have some guides on taking fights. However, I would just say the biggest thing here is just experience, just doing it yourself and, trying to get better and trying to think what you could have done better in that fight, trying to learn from your mistakes as well. All right, the next fight, it kind of goes along with knowing how to take fights, is also avoiding fights, or knowing what fights you should and should not take, right? So the top players, or the more you play the game, actually, you will kind of start to learn also what guards you should avoid, especially in the early game, right? So this is kind of straightforward. Like, you want to avoid usually ranged guards, unless they're like a tier 1 or 2 range, weak ranged units. You want to try to avoid things that have nasty abilities, like, let's say, magic elementals with no retaliation and magic immunity. So unless, until you get strong enough to actually be able to do that with no losses. So you want to try to avoid those things. You also want to avoid big guards, like combo guards. Let's say you have something that's guarding a hive and a major artifact. Well, that's going to be nearly double of the guard that the hive would have by itself. So you may want to think about that. Like, quest artifacts, you also want to try to avoid. Like, I had a hive guarded by 98 earth elementals because of a quest artifact, or also 98 air elementals, and I basically died to the earth elementals. The air elementals I did later, so I was actually able to do it. It was another game, but yeah, the 98 Earth Elementals, I didn't even expect that. It was 50.99, I expected a low 50, and yeah, it turned out to be almost 99 of them. So, and the way that you can tell that something is a quest artifact is if it is not part of a set. So things that are part of a set, like let's say Armor of the Damned, you know, so the Black Shard sword or like the Skull Helmet, those cannot be quest artifacts. But if it's like Runes of Imminency or Hideous Mask or Spirit of Oppression, something that is not part of a set, those can be quest artifacts. And usually you can find those artifacts on the map for free. So if they are guarded, you can assume that it's probably a quest artifact. Alright, and now we're getting into the last 3 tips. Those are going to be more about like your mindset and psychology. So the next tip is going to be play when you are sharp. And the reason that I have this here is because Heroes 3 is really a game that requires a lot of focus. And when you're playing PvP, a competitive PvP scenario, you need to really do a lot of things right and a lot of things well. And one little mistake can cause you to lose the game. Like, let's say, forgetting artifacts in your town or something like that. Or not having 100 moves to reach a town, or, you know, break your chains or something like that. So one little mistake can cause you to lose the game, and you're more liable to make those kinds of mistakes when you're not sharp, like when you're tired, or, you know, maybe you're drinking or something like that. You are not going to play as well. You're not going to have the patience, you're not going to have the focus that you need to really play this game well. So I actually, I kind of can compare this to poker, because I used to be a poker player as well, and I said this to myself with poker, that if I'm not sharp, if I can't think, if I, am not playing to the best of my ability, I should not be playing. And that's kind of what I try to do with Heroes. I try to stay away from the game when I know that I'm not, the sharpest, or when I'm tired, or, when I was drinking or something like that. Alright, the next tip is also slightly poker related, I would say, and that is do not tilt. What I mean by that is try not to get negative when you are playing the game, even if your biome is bad, even if things are not going well for you. If you start to get negative, which, happens to a lot of us, it's happened to me, and the funny thing is, it's like when I played poker, like I used to see this in a lot of people, where every time they lose, they complain, and they're like, oh, how can I run so badly? Why do I get so unlucky? And everything that they do is like a story that they tell themselves to prove to themselves that they're unlucky. It's like their story that they tell themselves and other people, right? And they kind of make that a reality, because when you do that, when you get into this negative mindset, you are going to try less, you are going to play worse, and you may not do or see certain things that could actually help you win the game, even if you're in a bad situation. I've had multiple games where after I analyzed the game, after I actually lost, I realized that if I did one little thing differently, I would have won. If I had, just like 5 more mana, or just a little bit more, or one little thing, I would have actually won, even though the situation was bad. So usually there's going to be an opportunity to win the game, or, to at least deal with the situation that you have to deal with, and you're likely not going to see that opportunity if you're tilted. So if you, just look at it from the point of view of, all right, this is a difficult situation, but how can we do it? Think about how you can actually overcome this situation. If you come at it from that perspective and do not get negative about, like, oh, why am I so unlucky? Why is this going so badly? Again, I have a bad biome, that's just not going to do you any good. It's going to take your mental resources, and you're going to be, you're just not going to be playing as well as you could if your mindset was more like, all right, well, this is the situation, this is the reality, now let's think about how we deal with this, right? And the last tip I'm going to share with you guys is analyzing your games. So this is Well, I wouldn't say it's the most important, but it's definitely a really important thing in improving is looking at the game afterwards, looking at the map afterwards, and also thinking about what you did, being honest with yourself about the mistakes that you made, and trying to improve, trying to understand how you could have done something differently. Because if you don't do that, if you don't, try to think about what you could have done differently, you will not improve, right? So this is really important, and I would actually say, a lot of people have said this to me, like when I first started playing, and after a couple of months, like I really tried to analyze my games after, after I won or lost, and try to improve, try to see what I could have done better and how. And a lot of people have said that because of that, they say that I've improved a lot, and they say that it's because of that, because of the post-game analysis. So definitely a really important thing to do. Don't get lazy with that. And also, this is why you want to be sharp when you play, because if you are sharp, you're going to be more kind of inclined to do that post-game analysis rather than if you're lazy or if you're drunk or something like that, you're like, whatever, I lost or whatever, I couldn't have won, right? So, sometimes it may be hard, sometimes we may be mad about losing, but the more we try to look at ourselves as the problem rather than something else that we couldn't control, like RNG or luck, the better off we will be. This actually goes for life as well, right? The more you can look at how you can improve rather than, why am I so unlucky and things like that. So, alright guys, that's it for the Magician's top 10 tips in improving at the PvP aspect of Heroes 3. I hope that this helps you guys, so I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you guys for watching, and as always, check out my Twitch stream if you guys want to see more English Heroes 3 content. And you guys can also follow the Facebook page, as I will be doing a giveaway really soon once we hit 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. Alright, so thanks once again, and I will see you guys soon. Peace out.